Hey guys, this is Frankie Edgar, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben.
This is Diego Sanchez, Randy Couture,
Alice Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to another episode of Submission Radio. Dennis Grada here with Kasper Rozalowski with a big episode of Submission Radio for you guys this week.
Oh yeah, plenty of topics to cover and plenty of people to speak to. The guests this week are none other than Mike Winkeljohn, returning to the show from obviously the world famous Jackson Winklejohn's gym. He's going to be talking to us about Holly Holm's big loss last weekend and everything surrounding UFC 196, Alistair Overeem versus Arlovsky, John Jones versus Daniel Cormier. A lot of things to talk about with the man. Chael Sonnen returns to the show to talk about, well, pretty much everything. We got a lot of topics to cover. World Series of Fighting had a big night last night, so there's that to cover with him. And then Gunnar Nelson, a cult favorite, returns to the show to talk about his big fight with Albert Tumanov. And of course, we've got to get his thoughts on Conor McGregor's recent loss. And then we got a breakdown, don't we, Dennis?
Yeah, that's right. Coming on the show is a regular man that you know so well from all his previous appearances. Elias Cepeda from Fox Sports will be on the program. We'll be breaking down Conor McGregor's future, what's going to be happening next, this whole drug test failure between Kimbo Slice and Ken Shamrock, what does it mean for Bellator, and a lot more. So very excited to have him on the program. And for those listening, wondering what the schedule will be, we'll have Coach Wink on first, Gunnar Nelson second, Chael Sonnen third, and then Elias breaking things down with us after that. So it should be a very, very action-packed show and a lot of stuff, really exciting stuff happening to talk about. So it's great to be back. Just quickly, Cass, before we go, we have a very special Technique of the Week series going on right now with a very exciting Australian fighter, don't we?
For sure. I feel like we've been teasing this one for a while. We did have Anthony Prosh demonstrating his BJJ for the last quite a few weeks, actually. We've got a very short but a very juicy series with UFC middleweight. I think he's ranked number 8, I want to say. Robert Whittaker, our very own. So I'm very, very happy about that. He's got some great techniques, pretty much all striking with his coach, Henry Perez. So check those out. The first one has dropped, I believe, last week on Wednesday. The next one's coming in a matter of days because we're already sitting here on Monday, Australian time. So definitely check that out. And a lot of other stuff coming to the YouTube channel. Tons and tons of stuff coming. We'll be talking about that towards the end of the episode. But also, don't forget, guys, hit us up on Twitter at SubmissionAUS and the Facebook, Submission Radio AUS, because we love chatting with you guys.
Yeah, that's right. So a lot of stuff going on, but it's time to kick off the show, and we've got our first guest on the line.
All right, guys. Returning to the program is one of the best coaches in the business. He trains such fighters as John Jones, Holly Holm, Andrei Arlovsky, Alistair Overeem, Cowboy Cerrone, and many, many more. He is one half of the brains behind the 2015 Gym of the Year, Jackson Winklejohn, and has been kind enough to return to the show to chat with us today. Coach Mike Winklejohn, welcome back to Submission Radio. How's it going today?
It's going great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Now, the last time we had you on the show, Mike, you told us there were 4 Australians training with you at the gym. We were hoping to get that number to about 20 or 30. How are we looking these days? Any more Aussies swinging by since then?
I would say, well, a little disappointed in you guys out there. It's down to 0 at the moment. Everybody went home. I think they had fights, etc. But we're hoping to get some guys back right away.
Oh, man.
Build those numbers back up.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they need to get out from home and come back to Jackson Wings. We also joked about the delicious delicacy that is Vegemite. Has anybody offered or tricked you into tasting any yet?
No, you know what? You guys scared me enough that I can't be tricked now.
we have that effect on people. We scare them out of doing things. It's not a good look, Wink. But in all seriousness, Jackson Winkeljohn was the name of the Gym of the Year for all the team's achievements in 2015. How good did that feel to have the extra recognition on top of such a successful year?
It was great. Just kind of it's almost embarrassing. I don't really need the recognition and stuff. We just love our job and the fact that we can help these guys and Holly, live their dream. That's what we're blessed to do that for a living.
I'm wondering, how does the team celebrate such a big win? Was there a big party at the gym? Or I know you guys seem pretty humble, or did you guys just sort of sweep it under the rug like, yeah, whatever, no big deal?
Yeah, basically secondary. Yeah, just whatever. Back to work Monday mornings. We want to continue to be the best gym in 2016. We want to make sure we have the best fighters in 2016. So that's our goal.
Mm-mm. Well, let's get right into it, Coach, because a lot has been going on in the world of MMA, and unfortunately, one of those things was Holly Holm losing the bantamweight belt to Miesha Tate at UFC 196 in a stunning upset. What has the last week been like for you, and what has the vibe been like in the gym?
Everybody's disappointed. Holly's one of those people that is very well liked. It broke a lot of people's hearts around the gym. They were telling me. I know it broke my heart. We made a couple mistakes, and Miesha won the fight. We're looking definitely forward to having a rematch. I think we definitely want to do it on that UFC 200 card in July. I don't think Ronda Rousey is anywhere close to coming back anyway. So hopefully Miesha is willing to pay back Holly. Holly didn't wait for Ronda, gave Miesha a shot at it, and hopefully Miesha repays the favor.
Well, let me ask you, given the state of the division, do you think the rematch is warranted? Do you think that, I guess, Holly Holm versus Miesha Tate 2 is the fight that makes sense, in your opinion? Oh, yeah, by far. I think that's for two reasons. One, it was a great fight. You got to see, styles that collide in such a way. Stand-up versus just scrambler wrestler. And people want to see what's going to happen. They want to watch the fight again and see if Miesha can do it one more time, or if Holly can keep that from happening and put a little more hurt on her. So I think that's exciting that way. I also think that it's very sellable because they're both really, really likable young ladies.
No, certainly right. Now, let's just talk about the fight a little bit. Your prediction before the fight was that Holly would get the KO in the second round. Were you worried when you saw that Holly didn't get the KO and got dominated in the second round on the ground?
Oh, I was very worried. You know what? I know she got in. Holly threw a straight left punch. With any kind of without an angle change, without any kind of upward motion, without anything that intimidated Miesha from coming in. So we made a mistake there. So I knew why it happened. I knew we didn't need to make that mistake again. And we had corrected it. Holly was doing well. We just lost a little focus there in the fifth round. And here we are today talking about our defeat. Sucks.
I know. We hate to sort of go over it with you, but I guess that's exactly what we're going to do. The third rounds and fourth rounds clearly belonged to Holly. When that fifth round started and Holly seemed in control, at that point, did you think she had it in the bag and that she was on her way to a decision win?
Yeah, well, never in the bag. I know we had to, keep doing what we're doing. But, yeah, I did feel good. Maybe a little overconfident. Maybe I should have, I second-guessed myself on some of the decisions. Our forward pressure with our strikes was working real well, and I stayed with it. I could have, looking back at it, had Holly disengage a little bit more and do what she does and just use the whole cage to move. But I really felt that Holly with the pressure was going to continue winning the fight, and maybe you'll finish the fight.
Yeah, certainly. I'm just curious, Coach, if Holly did pull through in that round and won the fight, how would you have assessed her performance in this one?
Well, a little tentative, but good because she was following the game plan. She was, making sure she was in the right place at the right time to not get taken down except for in the second round. So just a little adjustments. I think, no one really wants to strike with Holly. She walked out even though she was on the bottom for most of the second round, and Miesha was doing a lot of ground and pound. Holly was unscathed. She was deflecting everything off. It looked bad, but she really didn't take any damage. I think Miesha was as tired as Holly was from all that. So it gave Holly some experience on the ground. She learned a lot of neat, valuable things from it. And Holly's back in the gym. She's back in the gym already working on what she needs to do to get better.
I'm just wondering, what was your reaction when Miesha did get it to the ground in the fifth and went for the choke? Did you think that Holly was in that much trouble and it would end the fight considering that she got out of it in the second round, or did you expect her to be able to get out of it?
It was about 50-50 for me. I knew it was a threat. That is scary. It was deep right away. Miesha got under condition very quickly and deep enough that it made it very hard to hand fight and do some of the things that she needed to do. When Holly ducked and rolled over, I knew that was probably the end when she made that choice. So that tells me how deep it was.
Now, you've trained her since the very beginning, so you've seen her after all her losses. How was it this time around? Did she take it any different than in the past, especially considering that it was the first defeat in her MMA career?
Oh, she was pissed at herself, and she's won 3 matches. It wasn't bad in that she knew what her mistakes were. We knew what we did wrong, and so she knows she can fix those mistakes. was unlike when she got knocked out once in boxing, where there was some damage taken, and we were worried about it. This was not so bad. It sucks. She knows she has to build it back up. I know she said she has not been able to sleep. She just thinks about the fight constantly, but she'll be back, and that's who Holly is. She doesn't really care about anything else right now but getting that rematch.
Do you think it's almost harder for her because she was on her way to win it, and deep down inside of her mind, she knows that if the fifth round went a different way, she would have still been the champion?
Oh yeah. But at this point, there's not much you can do about living in the past. I can just go forward and learn from your mistakes. And in our mind now, it wasn't a perfect book for Holly in her MMA career, but in some ways it might be even better. So we get the rematch, we win the title back, and we go forward. I think the book, looking back on a lifetime, will show that Holly perseveres. When she loses, she gets back up on her horse and wins. She doesn't complain and go into a little shell and look for people to feel sorry for her. She's a fighter. And
I'm just curious, because obviously we saw that massive parade that Holly had when she won the belt. How has the city of Albuquerque taken it? Have they taken it just as hard as, maybe not just as hard, but everybody nonstop still say, you'll be back. We know what kind of fighter you are, and people care about Holly, and they've expressed that they care about Holly, and they say win or lose, she's still the champion of this town. So it's been fine.
Now, obviously, there was a lot on the line in this fight. One of those things was the title. Another thing was obviously her legacy. But the third thing was that massive, massive rematch with Ronda Rousey. What do you think is the biggest thing that's affected Holly about this loss? Was it the fact that, obviously she's lost the title, the legacy, or was it the obvious financial hit that she's taken from, not being able to have that massive rematch with Ronda Rousey now?
Well, two things. She doesn't give a crap about the financial side. Mm-hmm. That's Holly, and that's why I think she's a champion for everybody. The money is not important to Holly. She would rather have 0 losses on her career than $10 million. That's huge to her. So the money's not the issue. Will Ronda come back? I don't think Ronda was going to come back to fight Holly anyway at the moment. So I think the only choice was to take Miesha Tate. No matter what Dana White says, there wasn't really any other choice. It's Holly wants to fight. That's what she wants to do, and she didn't come out ahead. But we'll get it back. We'll get it back. So now there's Miesha and Holly, and if Ronda comes back, there'll be 3 girls vying for the title.
It's interesting because people are sort of saying now that Miesha's beaten Holly and sort of shown the fact that she does look a bit human on the ground, it looks like Ronda Rousey is more likely to return to MMA than before. Do you guys find that kind of funny now that Tate is the champion? It looks like Ronda is a lot more likely to come back sooner.
A little bit. You know what? I think that Ronda knows that she's already beaten Miesha twice, so if she's going to come back, I think she's a little intimidated by Holly coming back, and that it won't change. Her fight with Ronda. I'm still very confident that if Holly fights Ronda, it'll be the same outcome again, just because of the way the styles are. And I think it'll be different next time she fights Miesha. I think Miesha has improved as a fighter, and I think she's tremendous at what she does. So I love the competition, and I think the fans want to see more of it and what these ladies can do.
Before we move on and obviously talk about John Jones and DC fighting UFC 197, just want to get your thoughts on something else that happened that night. Obviously, you were there. Conor McGregor lost in another stunning upset to Nate Diaz. Just wondering if you got to watch that fight, and what did you think of it?
I did sit down and watch it. It was one of those moments where, we can't talk much about Holly's fight. I was very surprised that Conor decided to stay at boxing length with Nate. I felt that he could have. I thought he was going to actually just use more kicks, use more of his footwork, move around, and wear the guy down because he caught him late in training camp. So I figured he would break him down with his kicks long range. But so I was real surprised, and I think maybe there was a little bit of ego took over on Conor's side, that he thought he could just stand there and outbox Nick Diaz at that long range. And he failed at it, and it was a little surprising to me that he made that call.
Now, a lot of people are calling for Nate to possibly fight Robbie Lawler at UFC 200, but of course, Carlos Condit was the other option that people wanted to see Lawler fight in a rematch. What do you think about it? Do you think Nate winning over Conor sort of hurts Carlos's chances a little bit about getting that rematch fight straight away with Robbie?
I hope not. You know what? I think Carlos and Robbie was the fight of the year up to this date. It might be again. I think Carlos deserves a rematch. A lot of people thought Carlos won that fight. I think if there's one to have, that would be it. There's no doubt about it. Not that Nate and Robbie Lawler wouldn't be a great fight. I think Robbie hits tremendously hard. But Nate can give anybody a run from his money. I think the kid's definitely talented, and as tough as they come.
I'm just curious, has there been any updates on Carlos? Have you spoken to him lately? Is he more willing to come back for any other fights apart from the big title rematch?
Not too much. You know what? Carlos is he's one of my smarter athletes in that he understands that there's more important things in life than fighting. So he wants to make sure he has his brains about him at the end of his career. And he has taken a lot of shots in some of these big fights. So he only wants to come back for the ones that he's really motivated for. And taking a lot of other fights, I'm not sure he'll take those. I really think he's leaning toward he'd love to get a rematch. There's maybe one or two other names that he wouldn't mind fighting again. Otherwise, you might have seen the end of Carlos Condit.
What are some of those other names, if you don't mind? If there's a couple of other names that he'd fight, what are they?
Well, you know what? I think he'd like to fight Diaz all over again. He'd have no problem with that, just to set the record clear, because I thought he'd dominate that fight. But some people, it's always, Carlos decided to start this new style of sticking and moving a little bit, which was a good choice. It worked out very well for him. And just because of the feedback, I think he'd like to have that one over again. I think he'd like to fight George St. Pierre again. But neither one of those am I confirmed with Carlos saying those are the two. He just said he'd like to have a couple fights. And if I had to guess, that would be the two.
Well, in a selfish way, obviously, we hope that he does return so that we can watch him, obviously, because we love his fight style. Looking towards the other former champion who's looking to aim to reclaim his belt, Jon Jones takes on Daniel Cormier next month, UFC 197. Give us the update. How's he been looking recently in training?
He's great. He's so far ahead on his training camp from any other camp he's had in a long time. He came into camp in shape, came into camp stronger than ever, and we're definitely working on his speed and his cardio now. And he's looking great. He's putting together the right amount of people to help mimic Cormier. We already did it once. I think he'll same outcome as last time, except I think Jon finishes the fight this time. And real excited about seeing that belt back around Jon Jones' waist.
You say, sorry to cut in, you say you think that Jon Jones finishes the fight. How do you think he does that?
You know what? I think it's going to be one of two things. He's going to get a good takedown and ground and pound. He's going to throw his elbows, I call them, because if Jon gets on top and starts dropping the elbows, everybody wants out. They want to exit. But I think he's going to break his body down first, honestly, with his striking, so that it's going to be that much harder for Daniel to get back up when Jon does take him down.
Yeah, certainly. Now, I saw somewhere, Coach, that Jon Jones is done with most of his community duty, but he's still going around to schools and other areas like the community areas and still doing his presentations. Is that correct? Is he still doing that? And do you think a part of him has sort of evolved and almost changed having gone through that process?
I think so, and I hope so. I think it's a process with Jon growing up, and he's done real well. In fact, yesterday he did speak at one, just yesterday, and Jon is doing a lot of good things now that he had not done before in the past. He's growing up every day, and he seems to even be training harder, and he wants his title back.
I'm not sure if you watched the UFC Unstoppable press conference, Mike, but Jon and Daniel had a lot of back and forth with Daniel seemingly getting somewhat worked up. Do you think Jon has gotten into Cormier's head again leading into this fight?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think, Daniel, has his title, and I think he probably has a little bit of doubt that he can keep his title, and that's got to piss anybody off. And so definitely Jon Jones has gotten to his head. And I think Cormier, on a personal note, is that, gosh, what a good guy, what a great wrestler, he hits very hard, but Jon's got this one.
We all remember in the first fight, Daniel Cormier was obsessed with taking Jon Jones down to prove a point. And at that cost, he really, in a lot of ways, didn't do very well. All he was thinking about is getting that takedown. Do you think that emotion will be a big factor in this fight again? Do you think Jon will get Daniel emotionally involved in the second fight?
Oh, I hope so. I think, we always try to take other fighters out of their comfort zone, and which breaks them down mentally as well as physically. And that's always been part of our plan with the camp. And I think that the same thing will play out. If Daniel works so hard for his takedown, like last time, it took more out of him for the takedown than it was worth. John popped right up, and Daniel was tired from it. Same situation we're looking at in this fight is he's going to have to work very, very, very hard for it, run through a lot of strikes on his way, and if he doesn't get it, John's on top, dropping his elbows.
As far as the game plan itself and training for the fight, does much actually change considering John already beat Daniel? And have you seen many changes and improvements in Daniel's game since the original fight with John?
I have not seen a lot of different changes. I think he's still the same Daniel Cormier. I think he's been trying to work on how to close the gap a little faster. But for the most part, he seems to be the same fighter that we've seen evolve up to this point in time.
Well, Daniel brought in glory kickboxer and MMA fighter in Chi Lewis Perry, who stands at 6'9" and weighs around 260 pounds. Are you familiar with Chi, and also with somebody of his size and caliber training Daniel? Do you think that will present any challenges for John during this fight?
It's very hard to mimic what John does. John has unpredictable strikes that people can't mimic. So I think that's an impossible task to find someone that does what John Jones does. And so they can bring in whoever they got, but it won't do them any good.
Here's one thing that I'm curious about, Mike. Even though obviously John never lost the belt, he has been inactive for over a year, and the DC rematch is what everybody wanted to see. But was there any point where you suggested John take a warm-up fight before facing Cormier again, especially considering how active DC's been compared to John Jones?
No, not at all. You know what? I've always said the only person to beat John Jones is himself. I think he's right back doing what he does, and he'll get his belt back.
And the reason why I asked that is because when we spoke to you last time, we spoke about Carlos Condit, who also had some ring rust. We talked about that in the first round against Thiago Alves. It took till the second round to find his groove. There's no concern about ring rust for you at all when John Jones steps in to fight a guy like Daniel Cormier, who's been fairly active recently?
John's kind of a different fighter in that mentally he has that switch. He doesn't have to get as comfortable in the fight. That as soon as the cage door shuts, he's ready to go from the first minute. When John's in shape, he's the first 10 seconds of fight could be all John Jones. He has that mental level.
Absolutely. And Coach, we appreciate your time. We know you're a very busy man. Final topic before we let you go, because there is a lot going on in the life of Mike Winkeljohn. Final topic is another two of your students are fighting each other. Alistair Overeem and Andrei Arlovski will be fighting. I mean, we've speculated about this happening for a really, really long time. Now it's official. What was your reaction when you heard they'd have to fight each other?
That sucks. I hate hearing about it. It was disappointing. It made all the coaches, feel bad at their stomach. It was, it was one of those situations that sucks. The fighters, ultimately, they get paid for by the UFC, so they get to call the shots, and so they're kind of stuck. They kind of have to fight each other. Not happy about it at all, because I like both guys. I will be cornering Andrei Arlovski in the fight because Andrei has been with us longer. I've had that conversation with Andrei a long time ago that no matter what, because he's been with us so long, I was going to be in his corner. So I'm going to be a man of my word that way and work his corner. And it's going to be very hard because deep down, you don't want either one of the fighters to get hurt. It just sucks. It's hard to explain how everybody feels at the moment. We have a couple coaches that worked with us that will be helping Alistair out, and Greg Jackson and I will be in Andrei's corner because a lot of it has to do with time and longevity at the gym.
Before we get into sort of how the training and everything will work, let me ask you, Coach, do you think this fight was necessary? I mean, you spoke about the fact that your teammates would fight each other if it has to do with gold, a title shot, something like that. But it doesn't really seem like these two guys fighting each other is a necessity. Was a part of you a bit disappointed because in a lot of ways, Arlovski could have fought someone else and Overeem could have fought someone else as well? Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about it. I think it sucks. I wish there would have been another fight, available. And I'm not sure, I have my conspiracy theory reasons, but it's a shame they have to fight each other. They could have done something else, but that's the choice that was made, and what can we do? I would love to have seen
Alistair fighting Cain Velasquez, and I don't know. I don't know. I'm disappointed.
We have to find out about this conspiracy theory. Me and Casper love conspiracies. What was your theory?
Well, I don't know. You know what? The gym's getting powerful. We're getting a lot of fighters and stuff. So sometimes I think deep down, and maybe that they want to break the gym up a little bit. So anyway, we got two guys coming in and that have trained at the same gym. They haven't trained with each other all that much, but the fact that the coaches have to split up really sucks.
Here's the interesting thing. Obviously, you told us that you're going to be cornering Andrei Arlovski, you and Greg Jackson. What was Alistair's reaction when you had to tell him at some point that, hey, Alistair, unfortunately, we're not going to be cornering you for this one? Well, how did he take it?
I think Alistair's okay with it. You know what? Alistair has been in the game a long time. He has fought his training partners before, especially in kickboxing. And so I think there's just that mentality that they beat the crap out of each other in the gym all the time, so it's not really that big of a deal in the cage. In his mind, it's just, got to go in there and get a payday. And they all want the title at the end of the day, no matter what, even if they're friends. Everybody wants the title. And we have to understand that as coaches that it's an individual sport. We're kind of on the periphery, and so the individual in many ways is more important than the team.
I'm very curious in terms of the training. How exactly will that work? So if you and you yourself and Coach Jackson work with Arlovski, you mentioned there'll be other trainers working with Overeem, but will you guys be going through strategies with Arlovski, and will those coaches be going through strategies with Overeem on how to beat each other, or will you guys just sort of be there, but they'll have to sort of strategize on their own how to approach the fight? How will this all work? Because obviously you guys have an intimate understanding of both fighters and their flaws and their strengths.
Well, it's just one of those things that, everybody's going to, strategize and figure out which tactics are best to beat, the other fighter. And they're just going to work out in the gym at different times, and people are not going to watch each other and be respectful and courteous and just turn it into, this is a sport. It's not life or death, or else we would never do it. And, because we care for both guys. But, everybody has a job to do, and we're hired to do a job. And that's kind of how we feel about it. We're not happy about it, but we have to continue working.
Last few questions and we'll let you go, Mike, we promise. Just obviously one of them is going to hit another bump in the road, but considering that both Andre and Alistair were very much at low points in their careers not too long ago, how proud does it make you to see them both so close to title contention under your guidance?
Oh, yeah, we're real happy with that. We think that it's, even though it's an individual sport, and I was talking about it, it's the team concept that we have at the gym that affords that to happen. I think the guys have been willing to help each other out in the gym and make each other better. And our gym is about educating fighters on strategy and tactics, and not just letting them beat the crap out of each other, but helping them to improve. And so I think we're happy and we're proud that we can help them fulfill their dreams.
Yeah, certainly. And Overeem is on a 3-fight win streak. He's coming off a brutal knockout win over a longtime rival in Junior Dos Santos. Is it fair to say that his confidence is highest it's been in a long time?
Yes, definitely fair to say. He's very, very confident fighter. He believes in what he does. He can sit down and say, I want to do this in the fight. I think this is going to work, and that's what he will do. He's confident in the game plan that has come up with is going to be the proper one to use.
And the final question, Mike, for you as a coach of both guys and knowing them fairly intimately, how hard will it be to watch them try and finish each other on the actual night of the fight?
That's going to be very hard. Like I said, it's a tough thing that you want to, you want them, you don't want either one of them to get hurt. And that's the key to it, So we have to design things that knock the other person out because they both have that capability. But it's in a beautiful world, nobody really takes any damage. And I don't even know if I'm talking right with that because you want them perform well, but no long-term damage. That's my goal on this one.
Well, there you guys go. The gym is Jackson Winkeljohn. It is one of the premier gyms in the world. Make sure you go down there if you're listening here in Australia. The dorm rooms are amazing, and Coach Wink apparently takes you on fun runs in the desert. So something you can't miss out on. And also make sure to follow Coach Wink on Twitter at MMA Coach Wink. Coach, as always, it's been wonderful having you on the program. Best of luck in another crazy year of MMA.
Thanks for having me, guys, and hi to everybody down under.
Hi guys, it's Joanna Jędrzejczyk, UFC strawweight champion. Listen to Submission Radio.
Our next guest will be fighting Albert Timnov at UFC Rotterdam on May 8th. Coming straight out of Iceland, it's a pleasure to welcome back Gunnar Nelson to Submission Radio. Gunnar, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much for having me.
It's always great when you come on. Now, we got to ask, what's the weather over there like in Iceland right now? Because we hear it can get pretty cold at this time of the year.
Yeah, it's about not too bad now. It's, I think, maybe 3 degrees. Maybe a little rainy. I'm actually standing outside. It's quite nice.
Paint a picture for the listeners. What are you wearing there outside, Gunnar? Because here in Australia, people, even in winter, people wear shorts and thongs. What are you wearing?
I'm wearing a pair of joggers and like a pretty thick, like a winter jacket. It's like a wool jacket.
Very nice.
Very Icelandic look.
Yeah.
Very, very nice. Now, Gunnar, before we jump into your next fight, we want to get your thoughts on the upset loss your teammate and friend Conor McGregor suffered last weekend. We have to find out, what did you think of the fight? He was winning the fight, I thought, and but to me it just looked like he punched himself out a little bit. Fighting the bigger guy, I thought he maybe could have used the speed a little bit more and kept himself, and instead of using his power and swinging all these punches, But it's easy to say stuff afterwards, but maybe. I think that's maybe what it was, and he said it himself. He said he should have kept his energy better. He should have picked his shots better and moved around Nate to take his time. I think that's probably what he should have done, fighting the bigger opponent. You can't fight bigger guys with relying on power.
Well, that's the thing. He did throw a lot of bombs, and he's usually a lot more strategic in his shots. Did it surprise you at all that he took that approach?
Not really. I think he really thought he was gonna take Nate out quickly, and maybe that was in his mind a bit too much, and then he was maybe forcing that game plan or something. I'm not exactly sure, but so. I think maybe that was forced a bit or something. I think he could have taken his time a little more and felt Nate out and then done his thing. And I think he definitely would have won the fight then. I think he has the skills, and I honestly think he's the better fighter. But I think it was the strategy was the problem.
Yes.
It was like a tactical problem, not a technical problem. And I think, basically he got tired. He punched a lot of glove. He basically punched a bit too much, I think.
Yeah, well, we like to call it, when we play basketball games on our PlayStation, the three-pointer problem, which is where when you get one three-pointer, you start going for more and more three-pointers. Do you think in a lot of ways, kind of believed that he had the power to knock Nate out and sort of forgot about the other part of his game that really makes him successful? Because leading into this fight, a lot of his teammates, and I'd like to find out from yourself as well, said that Conor had the power to knock out heavyweights. Do you think going in there, he was a little bit too focused on getting that knockout?
Yeah, maybe he was. It did look like that. He was looking for an early finish, but Nate was able to absorb his shot, and he moved well with his shots as well. So I don't think definitely not all of the punches connected fully. The ones that touched Nate I don't think they connected fully, all of them, because he was moving his head with the shots really well as well. I mean, you could see it in his face. He definitely clipped him a few times with some good shots, but you know, Nate is the bigger guy, and he's also very used to taking shots. I would imagine he's a good boxer, and I think, yeah, you should have picked him a bit better, and if he would have taken his time, because Conor is really good at that as well. So I think if he would have just kept it cool, taken his time, and not rushed anything, and not worrying about his power, it's there. He doesn't have to worry about it. He doesn't have to swing his arms. He just has to throw them out clean. Use the speed. He has speed on Nate, and then I think he would have finished the fight with a knockout. You know, maybe not in the first round, but you know, second, third, whatever.
Just got one more question regarding Conor, and then we'll move on to your fight. Obviously, the big problem now is that Conor has to go back to featherweight for the foreseeable future. We know how you feel about extreme weight cutting. We've spoken about it many times. Also, your father feels strongly about it. Was a part of you hoping he'd stay at lightweight or potentially welterweight so he could avoid those massive weight cuts?
Yeah, I would have liked to see him staying lightweight. I think that's more natural weight for him, and I think he would have felt a lot better, you know, before his fights and in the camp, and not having to worry about all the major weight cut. So I think it's more natural for him. But, you know, it is what it is. He makes the cut, and he does it every time, and it doesn't seem to affect him much in the fight. But you know me, I'm not a big believer or a supporter of this type of stuff, you know, this heavy big weight cuts. I like to see it taken completely out, and I like to see people just going into the fights, you know, in their walking around way, you know, people just fighting other people. They're the same weight, but they're not cutting the weight. It seems like a dumb situation to me, because some guy does it, then everybody has to do it. But I wish they would find a way for some rules, you know, to get rid of it, you know, because it's, you know, it's just dumb, innit?
Yeah, and One FC actually, or One Championship, they've got a great new system that they're implementing there. So it's interesting if that takes off. Just quickly on that cut, how many times do you think Conor can make that cut? I mean, it's such a massive, massive cut. Do you think he can spend the rest of his career a featherweight, or do you see this as a 2-3 fight thing and then he'll sort of have to move up to lightweight? I mean, every one of these cuts, it seems like, takes more and more out of him.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I know he can. I know he can do it a few more times, definitely. You know, if he needs to, he can. But I would like to see him go up and have a little bit, you know, a nicer career when it comes to this, you know. And I think it would be a longer one, and it'd just be a more pleasant journey, just be a more real journey. It's just my perspective on this whole weight cutting thing. I think it's not great for martial arts, I think, either, because it creates this obsession about being bigger, you know. That the bigger guy always beats the small guy. You always want to focus on being bigger and stronger, and I understand it, you know, it's definitely a factor, but I just think it's become too much of an obsession to everyone in this game, and I don't like it.
Now, we want to obviously move on to you. We want to go back to UFC 194 and quickly discuss your last fight with Damian Maia. Things didn't go your way. What surprised you the most about Maia during the fight, and what did you learn from losing to him?
You know, he kept himself well. He does this every time, I guess. You know, he just kind of smothers people, and you know, from my perspective, it really wasn't my night, you know. What I learned from that fight was to survive, you know. I survived through these rounds, and that was basically it, you know. watching the fight, there are definitely some technical things that I could improve on, but I've seen a lot more technical mistakes in some of my other fights. I feel like the way I felt in the fight, the way my energy sipped in this fight was the main reason for that I wasn't able to perform. I felt like I wasn't able to perform, and that that broke my heart a little bit after the fight. I felt like people went to see me fight, and really I didn't show up. That's how I feel, But this is the game, You learn from this. There's always some reasons why we lose. Whatever it is, we need to figure it out and learn from it and move on. And that's what I'm doing,
Yeah, certainly. And it's interesting that you mentioned your energy being zapped. I'm very curious. Did you find out one of the reasons why you didn't have as much energy? Was there a lot of adrenaline for you going into the fight? Was the fact that it was in Vegas, it was such a big card, and your teammate was on the card? What was it? Could you pinpoint why you felt zapped in this one?
No, I honestly can't. It's nothing I was thinking or stuff like this. I don't believe it was. I believe it's just like a little physical thing that I've been dealing with for a while, and sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. It's a weird thing, and I don't really expect people to understand it, and I don't understand it fully myself. It's just sometimes it's there, and so in training as well. It's just I don't know how to explain it exactly, but it's just one of these things that you have to learn. It's just about learning how to use your own body and learning how to understand your body better. So to be honest, this fight really, really helped me. I think there's a reason for all these things, or at least you can take a lot from every experience you have, and you basically choose where to go from there and what you take from it. So it's positive in my mind right now, and it's done positive things to my training.
Well, that's good. And looking forward, you're fighting at UFC Rotterdam, which in itself is very exciting because you'll be in front of your European fans. How do you feel about fighting there instead of Vegas?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed fighting in Europe. I've never been to Rotterdam or Amsterdam. I've never been there before, so I'm very excited to fight in a different place. I always like that. It should be. I think it's the first card over there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty cool thing as well. Yeah, I'm excited to be there.
Yeah, it's a big part of history, and obviously headlined by Alistair Overeem is going to be a great night. But let's talk about your opponent, Albert Tumenov. He's a tough Russian who has some big wins under his belt and is on a 5-fight win streak in the UFC. However, he's not really a name that's known outside the hardcore MMA fan base. Were you happy with him as your next opponent? Was a part of you hoping for a bigger name, especially for such a, I suppose, historical card?
I'm actually very happy with this fight. I think he's a very tough fighter. I think it's a good challenge. I think I'm very much into martial arts and doing this as a challenge and for growing. I'm not the best prize fighter, I believe, and entertainer when it comes to all this kind of, prize fighting stuff. I really like martial arts and mixed martial arts, and I like competing. I like fighting and I like training. So I think this is I think he's a great fighter, and I really look forward to stepping into the octagon with him.
And I feel like in a time where a lot of people are trying to be that prize fighter, which is a good thing, you being a rare breed makes you kind of like a cult hero, Gunnar, where there's still that huge fan base that just does appreciate the true martial artist. But looking at Tumenov, he's got deadly striking, and 3 of his 5 wins in this streak have come via KO or TKO. With your karate background, do you still feel like you have an advantage in the striking department against him? Is this something that you want to challenge yourself with and potentially outstrike him?
Yeah, I definitely believe that I can find my advantages wherever it is, whether it's on the feet or on the ground. Everybody has their own style. I've got my thing going on the feet. He's got his. He seemed to focus a lot on the striking, the kickboxing, or that's how he wins his fights. I do have a different style, and I think I can definitely find my shots on the feet. But whatever the openings are, I will look for them and keep my mind open. If the takedown is there, I'll take it. If the submission is there, I'll take it. If the strikes are there, I'll take them, I'll just be moving around in there and keeping an open mind.
Well, you had a great return win over Brandon Thatch. You lost to Damian Maia. Considering that you're currently unranked, is there a part of you that feels like you need to beat Albert in highlight reel fashion to get back on track of your goal of eventually, getting that title shot?
Yeah, it definitely, every fight is the most important one, I believe. When it comes to thinking about this, if you're looking at rankings and trying to climb your way up, definitely I could say that I want to beat Albert in a great fashion, take him out in the first round, with strikes or with a submission. But then another voice in me tells me that I shouldn't really think that way, when I go in there, I should just let it happen the way it happens, and go in there and just, keep an open mind and just fight the best way I can. And I believe that when I do that, the outcome will be as positive as it can be. I believe when I do that, I'll be the best version of me. I'll fight the best fight that I can.
Well, speaking of the title shot, fans aren't sure who should get the next fight with Lawler. I mean, we're not massive fans of immediate rematches, so we think that the Condit fight maybe shouldn't happen straight away. Who do you think deserves the shot, and do you think that a potential fight with Nate Diaz may be a fun contest for UFC 200?
Yeah, I don't know who's next in line for Robbie. I'd actually like seeing Damian Maia climb up there. I'd love to see Damian Maia get the title. He's been in this game for a long time, and he's had an amazing career as a martial artist, not only in MMA, but just in jiu-jitsu as well. And, I'd actually like to see him get the title before he retires. And I think he could beat Robbie. I think his style. Obviously, Robbie is a tough guy, and he could beat Maia as well. But I think with the right strategy, he could beat him. And I'd like to see if he gets the shot. Or I don't know. Maybe Wonder Boy will fight Rory, and we'll see who wins that. And Rory has fought him twice now, though, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know.
It's an interesting division at the moment, Gunnar, so it's fun to be a part of it. But before we let you go, we have to do one final thing. We call it the Submission Radio Tap-Out Round. Prepare to have some fun as we throw some fun questions your way, and you answer with the first thing that comes to mind, as a bit like word association. So are you ready?
All right, go.
Have you watched Deadpool yet? And if so, we'd like a rating out of 5.
Yeah, I watched it the other day, and I thought it was very good. I laughed my ass off, to be honest. Rating 1 to 5.
Yeah, out of 5, give it to us.
I'm gonna give it 5, to be honest. I thought it was fucking great.
No
I
6.
Really enjoyed it.
Not good enough for a 6, Gunnar? No, we thoroughly enjoyed it as well. We've actually seen it twice each. Now, we know last time you told us you've been watching Vikings, but what other shows has Gunnar Nelson been binge watching lately?
I haven't really been watching any shows lately. I sometimes turn on like David Attenborough stuff, like Planet Earth and stuff like that. Rewatch a lot of that stuff. Other than that, I haven't really been watching anything. I'm waiting for Game of Thrones.
Yes, Game of Thrones. There's a few Vikings in that in Game of Thrones, isn't there?
Yeah.
And didn't the boulder or something come past your gym? And
the mountain.
The mountain. Didn't the mountain come past your gym?
Yeah. He's an Icelandic guy. I know him. He was out there in Ireland shooting for Game of Thrones when me and Conor were training. So he dropped by and Yeah, I came by the gym. I believe there's a video online of him and Conor that everybody has seen.
Yeah, I think
Going at it.
it's definitely viral, and I think Dennis and myself are probably two of the only people that don't watch Game of Thrones. I'm just wondering, did you train much with the Mountain, or not so much with him, but did you guys train him much, or was it just kind of like pop into the gym and then see you later?
No, he just popped in and I was just watching us train, and then they were just gonna have a little photo, and it just escalated and started punching each other in the stomach.
Wow.
And then we just had dinner after.
What? I'm just curious, what did the Mountain eat, and did he eat your meals as well?
Yeah, he ate a full cow, I think, and
Now
a
let's
chicken
get-
farm for appetizer.
Let's get to a serious topic, Gunnar. This is another question in the tap out round. Do you think Mighty Ducks 2 gave people the wrong idea about people from Iceland?
Yeah, definitely. I haven't seen that in years, but that is cracking me up a little bit.
That coach, I mean, there's that moment with Coach Bombay where he goes for his bum knee. That was a rough move, man.
Yeah.
But in all
Yeah, they were
seriousness,
very evil.
did you know that the main player from Team Iceland is also named Gunnar? And is this some kind of coincidence or some kind of crazy wizardry?
In the movie?
In the movie, yeah, the main player is called Gunnar.
Like I said,
What's the connection? Tell us.
well, Gunnar means a warrior, I believe. The name means a warrior. So, and it's a very it's a common Icelandic name.
Okay.
You know, so I guess that's the reason. But the most shocking to it all is that we really suck at ice hockey. You know,
Just
we
picked a
live in
random
Iceland
European
and
country.
we're really bad.
They were just picking a random European country, and they're like, who can we make evil? All right, we'll go with Iceland. Here's a question, and hopefully you can answer this. Is the Blue Lagoon always blue, or do you sometimes get to it and get disappointed by its lack of blue? Because then it's just a lagoon, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's not always blue, but it gets blue sometimes. Yeah, you could go in there and feel very disappointed because it's like all white.
No, false advertising.
Take us into a situation. So have you ever taken someone there? You're like, I'm going to take you to the Blue Lagoon. They're looking forward to the Blue Lagoon. You guys discuss the Blue Lagoon. You get to the lagoon. It's not blue. What is their reaction, and how do you decrease their disappointment? What do you say to them?
I haven't been in this situation before. I haven't really thought about it this way. Everybody that goes there really enjoys it, but yeah, I'm gonna start adding this to it now. I'm trying to talk more about the blueness of it and see how people react when it's not as blue as they thought. You know?
Yeah, I feel like few people have actually seen the lagoon and its optimal blueness. But finally, Gunnar, before we let you go, most important question: give us your prediction. I know a lot of guys aren't fans of these predictions because you want to see how the fight goes. But let's make it official. How are you beating Albert Tumenov at UFC Rotterdam?
However, you know, I'll go in there and I'll figure out a way.
Well, there you guys go. Make sure to follow Gunnar Nelson at Gunny Nelson on Twitter and watch him at UFC Rotterdam May 8th in the US and 9th here in Australia because of the time difference. It's looking to be very exciting to see the first card over there. Gunnar, thank you so much for coming onto our program and freezing outside in 3-degree weather. Well, we're enjoying this nice 30-degree heat here in Australia.
Lovely. Thanks, guys.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Demetrius Johnson, the UFC flyweight champion of the world, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Our next guest has taken on Michael Bisping in a grappling contest at Your Fight, March 20th on online pay-per-view. You also know him from his great work on World Series of Fighting, ESPN, and his podcast, You're Welcome. The busiest man in MMA, the American gangster, Chael Sonnen. Welcome back to Submission Radio.
It's good to be back, gentlemen. How are you?
Yeah, always great. Always fantastic when you come on the show. Let's cut to the chase. Let's begin with World Series of Fighting 29. Last night, Justin Gaethje put on another exciting and dominant performance by finishing the resurging Brian Foster in one round via leg kick TKO. At 27 years of age, a 16-0 record and another finish. Is there anybody, in your opinion, currently that you see potentially dethroning Justin Gaethje at this point?
To dethrone him, no. You know, you always fantasize about like a co-promotion, like they got into with the boxing business model, where he could go over to Bellator fight with Brooks, or where he could go over to the UFC and fight with RDA. But it'd have to be somebody like that. He's really a cut above. I thought Foster was going to give him bigger problems. Foster did give him problems. Foster landed a lot of shots, but the result's the result.
It's interesting because obviously Justin's done so well, and there's been a lot of discussion for a while now about how he would do in the UFC against the best at 155. How do you think he matches up to the guys up there in the UFC at 155? Do you think he holds his own in the top 10?
Yeah, I think he does. I think he does real well. It's hard to say. He's so incredibly dominant, but obviously the roster's a little bit thinner. It's an emerging organization that hasn't been around for 23 years like the UFC. So it's hard to say. You look at those guys in Zuffa, and they're deep. That belt changes hands all the time. When a guy like Anthony Pettis, who's one of the best fighters I've ever seen, is just one of the guys, not the guy or the top contender. I think that speaks to the level of depth that some of the other organizations have. So, as far as composure goes, as far as heart and grit, conditioning, skills, I got to search to find critiques on Gaethje. He gets hit a lot. He lets people hit him. That doesn't seem to bother him. Outside of that, I don't even really know where his weaknesses lie.
A lot of people say that one of the most exciting parts of his style could potentially lead to his downfall. Super entertaining fighter who loves a good brawl, but he does take a lot of damage in the process, like you mentioned. Do you think that if he keeps that, we may see his career cut a bit shorter than many would like?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, historically, that catches up with guys every time. Now, he does follow the basics. A lot of those guys that get hit a lot have their chin up and their hands down. That caught Chuck, that caught Roy Jones, that caught Conor a week ago. He does follow the basics. He buries his chin. He keeps his hands up nice and high. But as far as his head movement goes and as far as his ability to parry goes, it's just something he's not interested in right now.
I mean, you mentioned that the roster isn't the biggest at World Series of Fighting, but for his next matchup, what are you thinking? Who do you think makes best sense for him?
Well, he called out Jason High last night. Jason High is currently ranked number 3. High wants to fight. Gaethje wants to fight. The hardest part of putting those fights together is getting the champ to agree.
Yeah.
It's usually the champ that creates some kind of a problem to try to hold on to their belt. So when the champ calls somebody out, which is rare, usually the champ gets called out. When the champ calls somebody out, I think at that point you just fax contracts over.
Well, we'll get to Chael calling people out a little bit later, but speaking of great events, last weekend saw 2 major upsets in the world of MMA, and we'd like to get your thoughts on them. The first was Holly Holm's loss to Miesha Tate. Now, Chael, no one understands big fights like yourself. You discussed it, but for people who didn't hear it, please explain how much of a mistake it was for Holm to take the fight with Tate, in your opinion, and losing out on her big rematch with Ronda Rousey.
Well, I'm Monday morning quarterbacking here. I'm really splitting hairs, but she had a major opportunity to fight Ronda Rousey in an immediate rematch, and the way her contract works and the way the UFC analytics projections worked, it would have paid her about $10 million. On the other side of it is, who knows if Ronda's ever going to come back? Why should Holly wait till November? She's got this new contract. She's the new champion. She's not a rich gal. This contract has the ability to make her rich, but she's got to go out and activate it, which means she has to fight somebody. If I were in Holly's shoes, I would have done the same thing. I would have gone out and competed, expected to win, expected to just meet Ronda later. So, critiquing her isn't totally fair when I would have done the same thing, but it is the reality. She's got a manager that does not know what he's doing. He's not an MMA guy. He came from the boxing world, and he could be a perfectly nice guy. That's not even meant to be an insult to him, but he doesn't know what he's doing. And he got her a bad deal, and that's just the reality. Even her fight that she just had with Miesha Tate, he got her a bad deal, and he thought that he did a great job. He doesn't know this business.
I'm interested to hear, Chael, from your perspective, if you're the UFC now, what do you do with Holm? She's been asking for an immediate rematch at UFC 200 with Tate. Do you give it to her, or do you make Tate versus Rousey 3 instead?
No. Well, what I would do, what the UFC will do is they will make Tate versus Rousey 3. What I would do is I would just leave the title out of it completely. and I would do an immediate rematch with Ronda versus Holly Holm. The way the minds work at Zuffa is, look, we got UFC 200, we got to put the belt on the line, we got to put our top star against whoever the champ is. I disagree. I think sometimes you just got to make the fight. You know, Anderson versus Bisping, there was no title on the line, but that was a fight. Conor versus Diaz, which currently holds every UFC record there is, at least in pay-per-view, not live gate, but pay-per-view. There was no title on the line. It was just the fight that people wanted to see. So I think sometimes you just got to make the fight. But I know the way that they think over there, and they think, well, we lost that fight because Miesha's now champ. Now it's Miesha versus Ronda. So that's at least what will be offered.
Mm-hmm.
I would just hope that somebody in the room at least makes the suggestion of, why do we have to do it for the title? Why can't we just do the fight everyone wants to see?
Right. Well, jumping over to the other major upset, Conor McGregor took a major risk by going up in weight and losing to Nate Diaz. Now, before we get into your thoughts about what this does for McGregor and his drawing power, tell us, what did you think of McGregor's performance in the fight itself?
Well, McGregor fought really well. You know, size matters. It doesn't in the heavyweight division. There can be a 30 or 40-pound spread. It'll work against the bigger guy. But there's a tipping point. You know, there's a tipping point in the heavyweight division where guys get slower and they get tired faster, and you want to be the lighter, more agile competitor. But at that size, it matters. And there was about a 15-pound discrepancy when they got in the ring, which represents about 5% of body weight. I mean, it's a big deal. And Conor was able to land great shots, perfect technique, perfect power, everything. And they were the kind of shots that would have buckled somebody at the weight class he usually fights at. The difference is those guys weigh about 150 pounds when they get in the ring, and Diaz weighed about 183 pounds. So he was just simply able to absorb the shots. Before you knew it, Conor was exhausted. You know, he'd punched himself out, and that's just a reality.
It's interesting because a lot of people are sort of using you as an example of someone who could draw, you know, millions of people to a card, but you would lose a fight here and there. But what do you think this does for Conor's drawing power? Because a lot of his promotion has been built on this almost superhuman notion that he can't lose. Do you think it's going to affect it severely?
No, it definitely won't. Not in the short term. You know, he's still the world champion. He still goes back down. He can patch up the boat with 2 to 3 microphones in his hand, unlike most other fighters. He's got a different skill set. So, no, he's going to do real well. And frankly, that invincibility factor traditionally has worked against guys. You know, there's only been one heavyweight of all time that could fight and draw being invincible, and that was Mike Tyson. You know, even John Jones, as great as he is, until recently wasn't able to draw very well. Anderson never drew until I came around, and I don't mean to insert myself in this, but again, that's just his numbers. So, no, being invincible isn't a tremendous drawing point. Yeah, good competition is, and somebody that's exciting. So he's going to do fine. But to say that it won't take a dip, yeah, I think he'll take a little bit of a dip. But I think he'll, even with a dip, he'll still be the biggest star the company's got right now.
And you're saying he'd be a bigger star than Ronda Rousey? Because it always seems like those two are neck and neck.
He's always been. He's always been. That's never been true. She's a good friend. I don't mean this negative, not even a tiny bit, but that's never been true. I've never understood why they have constantly said it. God bless them. It's just simply not true. Conor holds the gate records, Andy holds the pay-per-view records, and she hasn't touched him.
Right.
And that's the truth, regardless of what you might read in the media.
Well, his next fight seems like a title defense against Frankie Edgar, potentially Aldo, but let's assume it's Edgar. He's a very, very tough fight for McGregor. Do you think we're looking at a very real possibility of McGregor potentially losing 2 fights in a row here?
Oh yeah, definitely. 2 or 3 or 4. You know, you got to understand how tough the weight classes that he's in are. You know, the strap changes hands constantly. Jose Aldo held it for a record period of time, and that record's not going to be beat anytime soon. That weight is just too hard. You know, same thing with 155. That belt's on somebody new constantly. Anthony Pettis was on the cover of the Wheaties box, what was that, 18 months ago? And now he's just one of the guys, and he's one of the best fighters I've ever seen. Anthony Pettis can do, just amazing and crazy things. But that weight class is that hard. It's so tough at 55. 45 is even tougher. So, yeah, could he lose to Frankie? Absolutely. Where does he go from there? Well, he goes right into another stud because he's such a big draw. He's always going to be a main event. Whether he's fighting for the belt or not, he's going to be the main event in the foreseeable future, which means he's fighting another stud from the toughest weight class there is. Yeah, he's going to get beat, but so's Frankie, so's Jose. They just are. So's Cub Swan. You go through the list, they're going to get beat. It's just that kind of a weight class.
Mm.
And good athletes do get beat. The only sport where they fix it is like boxing, so that it's organized. The good athletes get beat. You go look at Kobe Bryant. You go look at what's that other basketball player? LeBron James. These guys lose 20, 25 games a year. You go look at Peyton Manning. He lost 8 games in the last 4 months. Good athletes get beat constantly. The boxing model came along a little bit different because nobody was paying attention. Nobody watches boxing except for the big fights, so they padded guys' records. They could put them on Sports Center and say they're 30-0 with 28 knockouts. But the reality is that the good athletes get beat a lot. Wayne Gretzky got beat all the time, at least once a month his entire career. There's not a solid athlete out there that you could bring up to defeat that argument. Guys that go on to win the Olympic championship, they'll lose 10, 12, 15 times that year.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a very interesting perspective. Let me ask you something, Chael, because something that made us laugh this week was Justin Bieber coming out and saying he thought Nate Diaz has a terrible MMA style. We have to get your thoughts on Bieber's comments. And is this almost like a victory with possibly one of the biggest stars in the world, commenting about one of the UFC fights?
Yeah, it was definitely cool. It was a good thing. Bieber's a big fight guy. I thought it only extended to boxing. His brother and his father are big MMA fans. They tweet about MMA all the time, but I've never seen Justin do it. It was a win. And look, he backed his guy. He's a fan. He likes Conor. Good for him. He didn't blow in the wind like everybody else that liked Conor. So I thought that Nate's response was beautiful and hilarious in Diaz fashion, but it was definitely, the whole thing was a good fun.
Now, before we get into your big grappling contest with Michael Bisping on March 20th at your fight, we want to quickly get your thoughts on his fight with Anderson Silva. Great performance by Bisping. Where do you think Anderson goes from here, and what's his place in the middleweight division at this point in his career?
I know the fight they're talking about for Anderson right now. I know what's been offered. I can't tell you, and I'm sorry to do that to you, but I just found out, and it hasn't been made public, and I found out from the opponent.
Does it rhyme with Jim Kennedy?
No, not even close. So I know which way they'd like to go with it. Anderson's going to do just fine. I thought he competed very well. He definitely lost the fight. It without question was 3 rounds to 2. But, he's been out for a while. Let's not forget he suffered one of the most horrific injuries in the history of the sport. He bounced right back. 12 months later, fought 5 hard rounds. Takes another 13 months off. Fights 5 hard rounds. And any analyst, you, me, anybody listening to this, we're all going to come to the same conclusion that the longer the fight goes, the better it's going to be for Bisping, that Anderson's going to tire out, and that's just physiology. He hasn't been in there, and he's taken on, the cardio king of the division in Bisping. And the reality was Anderson won the 5th round. Anderson was coming on hard late. He's 40 years old. He's coming off an injury. He's coming off a year plus a month layoff, and he won the 5th round against, one of the top 3-4 guys in the world. I think that he looked great, but, the other side of it is, he's always had problems with wrestlers, and he's never had a problem with a stand-up fighter. He fought a purely stand-up fight, and he lost it. So I get that critique, but I still thought that he fought really well. I thought he looked good.
Yeah, it's certainly a performance where both men came out and people really thought both men performed well. But we have to ask you about this grappling contest against Michael Bisping on March 20th. Tell us a bit about the process. How did you come across it, and what made you want to take this matchup? Because for people that don't know, you guys obviously had a fight in the UFC previously. What motivated you to be a part of this grappling contest?
Well, I got asked to fight on the card. I initially got asked to fight in boxing against Roy Jones Jr.
Wow.
I can't fight in any capacity for another few months. I'm on a suspension right now, and I can't do any kind of fight, whether you want to call it boxing or MMA. I just can't do it. So I said, I'd love to participate, but I can't. I'm suspended from fighting. So they said, well, that's in Nevada. We're gonna hold this in Abu Dhabi. That's initially where this was going to be, on a rooftop in Abu Dhabi. And I said, man, I don't care where you put it. I made a deal specifically with Pat Lundvall. She spoke for the whole commission, but specifically I looked her in the eye and told her I won't fight for 2 years. I can't fight. So they said, all right, you want to commentate? And I said, yeah, I'll commentate. And then somehow it transferred to, well, how about a grappling match? I said, well, that I can do. So I was going to wrestle with Rampage, and we both signed contracts, and about 4 to 5 hours after we signed, Rampage calls up and says, man, I got to pull that out. He said, Viacom just stepped in, and, they're going to give me some problems if I go through on this. So
Did he call you, or he called your fight?
He called your fight, and then they called me and said, hey, Rampage is out.
Mm-hmm.
So we looked around for somebody else, and Bisping agreed to it in about a half a second, and that was really it.
I'm just curious. Let's say you weren't suspended and you did have the possibility to do the Roy Jones Jr. boxing match. Would you still have done it, or is it just not really your cup of tea?
Oh, boxing? Oh, I'd have whipped Roy's ass. Yes, I'd have definitely done it. I still might whip Roy's ass someday. It just won't be until I'm off this suspension.
Now, let's quickly talk about this grappling contest. Now, obviously, people know you've beaten Bisping in the UFC, but it was a very close fight, and Michael really impressed the fans with his grappling in your fight. How do you see this grappling contest playing out?
I'll make this really simple for you. Michael Bisping has no chance.
Why is that? I mean, that is simple. Why is it that he has no chance?
I'm better.
Let me ask you this. One of the reasons Bisping, a lot of people say he stayed a lot more upright in your fight when he fought in the UFC than they expected. One of the reasons was because of the cage. There's no cage in this one. Do you think that'll be a difference maker in this time around?
Yeah, I do. He was such a handful on the cage, offensively as well. And some people couldn't see that, but I could feel it. Like when we got to that cage, he wasn't just defending me, but then he was turning the tide on me. He ended up getting underhooks and a body lock, and he put me against the fence, and I'm stuck there going, well, this isn't how this is supposed to go. I couldn't get off, and then when I did get on top of him, he'd scoot over that cage and do what we call a wall walk and walk right up it, and he was out and gone again. I know guys that wrestle with him on a regular basis, and he doesn't always need that wall. That's primarily what he trains with, because he's an MMA fighter. He doesn't go out and do grappling. This is a new experience for him. But they say he scrambles well, that, in fighting he uses that wall a lot, but even in the open, he's going to scramble pretty well and get back up. And that's a strength of mine, too, in the open, is on top to not let guys up. So it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard work. He always shows up in shape, and I'm going to be in shape, and we'll be ready to go. But yeah, he's a problem. He's a problem for anybody. He's a black belt. I'm a purple belt. But I'm a wrestler, and he comes from England. They don't have wrestling, so I'll be a little better in that realm for sure.
So just for the people at home who may not really watch much grappling, what exactly are the rules for this match? Is it submission only, or is there a time limit? And is there anything else we should be aware of for this one?
No, you pretty well got it. So we're calling it Metamoris rules, and I actually coined that phrase because I wrestled Metamoris a few times. And the only difference from Metamoris versus Abu Dhabi, which are the two premier leagues, is in Abu Dhabi they have a point system. Somebody wins. In Metamoris, there is no point system. You either get a tap or you don't. If you go the distance, it's just called a draw. So that's really what we mean when we say Metamoris rules. It's just, hey, somebody's got to finish this fight, or there is no winner.
Mm-hmm. Chael, we really appreciate the time you gave us. We've got 2 more questions, and then we'll let you go. This is obviously an interesting concept, because joining your grappling bout will be an MMA fight between Tank Abbott and Dan Severn, pro wrestling match between Kurt Angle and Rey Mysterio, and a boxing fight between Roy Jones Jr. and a fan. How successful do you predict that this event will be?
Well, we'll see. You never know. The pay-per-view model is very tough, and it historically takes a lot of time to catch on. These guys have had an incredible marketing push, and they could do some great things. They got some big names on the card, and if these guys as fans come out to watch, I think they could have some real success. I know as far as the live gate goes, they're selling a bunch of tickets. I'm expecting something great.
Now, Chael, before we let you go, we have to ask you about some comments that your manager, Mike Roberts, told Ariel Helwani on UFC Tonight. He said that he firmly believes if the right fight and offer comes along, you'll jump at the chance to fight against once your suspension is up. We have to ask, is this true? And are there any names that stand out to you that would make you interested to fight again once your suspension is over?
Well, I would tell you this. He does believe that. He argues with me all the time, and it's very playful, but he just tells me, I always tell him, man, my race is ran and I'm done. And he says, yeah, I don't believe you. I think you're going to come back. I know you're in the gym and blah, blah, blah. And so he is sharing his opinion. The only pushback I would give is that he said for the right fight. Man, I'm not a bully. I'm not coming in to fight some dinosaur like, Vitor or Rich Franklin. If I come back, I'm going to whip all their asses. And I'm not coming back. But if I did, it wouldn't be for the right fight. I would come back and fight anybody in front.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're definitely not coming back once your suspension ends.
That's correct.
All right, well, we will see regardless. I'd love to believe you, Chael, but we're still hoping otherwise. Anyway, we really appreciate your time. Guys, you can follow Chael on Twitter at SonnenCH and watch him take on Michael Bisping at yourshow.tv March 20th via internet pay-per-view. As always, Chael, such a pleasure, and thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Take care, fellas. Bye.
What's up, fight fans? I'm the reason mixed martial arts is banned in New York, Tommy Toehold, and you're listening to Submission Radio. Let's do this shit!
All right, guys, now that the dust has settled and the smoke has cleared after UFC 196, a question arises amongst the fans. What is next in the MMA world? As such, we're excited to welcome our friend and Fox Sports writer, Elias Cepeda, back to Submission Radio to dissect some of the hot topics in the MMA world. Elias, welcome back to the program, man.
It's been too long. Thanks so much. Happy to be here, boys.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, and we'll jump right into it. Let's begin our discussion with some surprising news that came out via MMA Fighting about Bellator 149. Kimbo and Ken reportedly both test positive for banned substances. Now, MMA Fighting source reported that both Kimbo and Ken tested positive for banned substances at Bellator 149. Although the results haven't been revealed due to pending litigation, it's another blow for what was a strange night in MMA. However, Bellator 149, for people that don't know, was the highest rated show in the promotion's history, drawing an average of more than 1.9 million viewers. The bout between Slice and Data 5000 averaged 2.5 million viewers, while Gracie vs. Shamrock averaged 2.4 million. I want to ask you first, Elias, is it time to pull the plug on the Shamrock Slice experiment? Or with such high ratings, do you think Bellator should keep both men around for now?
I think they should go back to having a weekly tournament, but the only two competitors should be Kimbo Slice and Ken Shamrock, just every week against one another. I'd watch that.
Imagine the ratings, 2.5 million every single week, right?
They'd be the biggest MMA promotion in the world. No, I mean, listen, I have a lot of respect for anyone that fights. I think Kimbo Slice shows a lot of heart when he's in there fighting. I don't know that he does it in the gym and to get in shape and train consistently, but him and his opponent both obviously showed a lot of heart in that fight. I know people are making fun of him and stuff, but you got one dude in his 40s. The other dude fights until he has renal failure and cardiac arrest. Obviously, he should have gone in there in better shape, but geez, in the moment, that's a lot of heart. So I have sympathy for that. I have empathy for that. I have admiration for that. And Ken Shamrock's a favorite of mine for a long time ago, and I think he got the fuzzy end of the lollipop because the ref didn't see that low blow there. So that sucks. With that said, yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't do them any favors in my view. I think that type of stuff looks pretty bad, but it's hard to say no to those types of ratings. Now they may not have any choice. Ken Shamrock is a repeat offender. If this drug test, this supposed positive test holds up for whatever he may supposedly have tested positive for, and he's 50 years old, he probably won't have many more opportunities. Kimbo, yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see what they tested positive for, if they were more so-called recreation drugs or if they were performance enhancing. Kimbo looked in a lot better shape than he did when he fought Shamrock some months ago. So, maybe he had some good cooking or something at home. I don't know.
I was on that Dolce diet. Look, on a personal note, and as a fan, I'm not bothered whether they keep them around. Like, I'm not exactly chomping at the bit to see either of them fight again soon, just because there's plenty of other high-level and exciting fights to get excited about. Do I think Bellator will or should get rid of them? No, there's clearly money to be made from both guys. Like you mentioned, Elias, there's the ratings, and if they did it every single week, then in theory they could take over the world and expand to other markets. I don't know, nukes, missiles, whatever they want with those kind of ratings. Bellator's two biggest events, 138 and 149, had Kimbo and Ken on them. And clearly, people talk about how it's not a good look. Clearly, Bellator's going down the entertainment route and chasing ratings, so they don't really care about whether their promotion looks like a professional sports league or a sort of variety night with MMA fighters, street fighters, pro wrestling personalities on show. That's their thing, and there's nothing wrong with it. You got to do something that's different to the UFC, right? They'll never be the UFC. The other thing is, like you mentioned, we don't know what the banned substances were that Ken and Kimbo were caught for. Could have been marijuana, which is nowhere near as bad. Could have been steroids. Could have been certain painkillers or other drugs that are banned. We don't know. I think we probably would have to know before we judge them any further. Looking at Ken's physique for a 52-year-old man, I don't think people are really shocked, but nevertheless, we don't know. The punishment in Texas also, it's a 90-day suspension. It's almost laughable, and only a $5,000 fine. 90 days, what is that? I mean, it's almost an encouragement. Jeez. An encouragement to take something in Texas. Ken's last two fights were 8 months apart. He could theory have a double Texas suspension and still fight at the exact same rate. So I think you might even be able to fit a triple suspension in there. So I don't know whether either man will actually find a Bellator again or not, but I don't think it'll depend on this drug test. It'll purely depend on whether Scott Coker can find matchups for either guy or not. And if there's a fight he believes he can sell, expect him back in the Bellator cage.
Wow, well put, Cass. And I mean, great point made with Bellator. It's almost like the open mic night of MMA events. You have a clown coming on doing a bit of a dance, and then like a comedian, and then somebody's like stripping on a pole. It's a great entertainment spectacle. But I mean, in the co-main event, Slice, whose real name is Kevin Ferguson, defeated Data 5000 by third round TKO. Now that bout has officially been overturned into a no contest, according to mixedmartialarts.com. Although it drew 2.5 million viewers, am I safe to say, Elias, that no one wants to see this rematch happen?
I mean, I would have thought no one wanted to see the fight happen to begin with, but I guess a lot of people did. I mean,
2.5 million.
It's weird. Yeah, I know, right? So, like, it's strange. I don't feel like I have my finger on the pulse of the folks that are super interested in this. I mean, I feel like I'll watch anybody fight. Like, if there was two 12-year-olds across the street, and as long as it's a good one-on-one battle, I'd probably watch it right now. So I'll watch anybody fight. But like, I'm a little surprised that there was such big demand for it. But it's weird. I mean, I guess it depends on whether or not the casual people that tuned in to those numbers got the type of fight they expected, or a fight that they weren't satisfied with. Clearly, like, people that are only liking high-level MMA didn't like that fight, fine. But maybe the people that tuned in, like, the 1.9 million people that were just casual people that tuned in, maybe that's all they really wanted to see is two tough guys just go until someone nearly died, and in which case maybe they tune in again. By the way, I've got to look into that Texas thing. I had no idea that was their on the books suspension for drug. That's kind of crazy. Texas, by the way, will put mentally disabled people and children to death, but they'll only, if that's true, that they'll only suspend people for 90 days. That's kind of crazy. That's a heck of a juxtaposition.
Wow. It's the Wild West over there. Now, I don't want to offend anyone from Texas. You guys have fantastic barbecue. I think that people were sold on the feud and the bad blood between the two men, and they wanted to see a definitive close to the feud. It's an old way of selling a fight, and it resonates with anybody who's ever disliked somebody, or you can go back to your schoolyard days and think about how excited you were when there was a fight that broke out, or you knew two people were going to fight at lunchtime. And this is like the same thing. Two guys who hated each other. One of them was going to lose and have to bury their head, and the other would get the bragging rights. And people would see who would be that, big, I guess, loser as much as they wanted to see the winner. Unfortunately, what we got was like a sloppy street fight in an MMA cage by two individuals who had far less skill than, we as MMA fans are used to seeing. What's more is the fact that people expected knockout, very most likely from Kimbo. That didn't happen, and so it was a pretty terrible fight, at least by MMA standards. And one that I don't think could be sold again, and I don't think anybody wants to see it happen again. To me, I don't know how much you sort of looked into it beforehand, Elias. Maybe you sort of steered clear, but when I watched Dogfight and all that stuff, and watched the pre-fight interviews and the what was trending? Not D's nuts, baby nuts, and watch that press conference and everything that happened. I got pretty excited to see that happen, but I feel like it was a once in a lifetime thing for between Kimbo and Dada. So, and the other thing is, there's no guarantee that either man would be in better shape or that the fight would play out differently. And I think that fight was one of the biggest reasons why people debated whether Bellator 149 was a success or not. So, kind of stunk out the joint. I don't think anybody wants to sniff that fight again.
No, I don't think so. And if Dada does come back and they do this fight, you almost feel like he'll change his name to Dada 5 million, like the $1 million man, except play into his Dada gimmick a little bit. I don't want to see that fight happen. I thought I was one of those 600,000 fans watching it in disgust, going, "Oh my God, I can't believe this thing is happening." It was one of those things like when you see a couple of elderly people fighting in a supermarket aisle over the last can of soup. It was like one of those things. It's hard to watch, but you can't look away. So I think Mike Brown did an interview with Ariel Helwani and said that they're not quite sure if Kimbo will fight again after that performance. You'd think if you're in Kimbo's corner, you'd worry about him going out to another fight with that lack of cardio. And like you mentioned, if he is having trouble training or he's got injuries that prevent him from getting to that level of cardio, you'd worry about putting him into another fight. But then again, they say all your exes live in Texas, and that's why you reside in Tennessee. So it's just another reason why people keep fighting in Texas and these crazy laws exist. But let's move on to something a bit more relevant. With the recent UFC Unstoppable press conference, and now the McGregor-Diaz fight is over. The number of future fights have been announced, including Demetrius Johnson versus Henry Cejudo, Uriah Faber versus Dominic Cruz, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Rory McDonald. And I'd like to go around and see what fight is most anticipated by the panel. Elias, I'll go with you first. Which one of those fights stands out to you as an almost instant classic? Which one are you looking forward to most?
Yeah, it's tough to choose between those. I'm very intrigued by the flyweight title. I like Henry Cejudo a lot. I think he's got the type of wrestling skills, the type of athleticism, and maybe even the type of boxing that could pose if not a completely new level of challenge to Demetrius Johnson, at least a very different one. I feel like eventually in every fight, Demetrius is the better fighter, at least at flyweight in terms of wrestling. And I wonder if that'll be the case here. I feel like Cejudo has really good hands. I'm not saying anything new here. He has really good hands. He does it a lot of times very upright. I wonder if that's going to make him more susceptible. We see great wrestlers all the time get taken down in MMA. So I'm interested to see how the MMA wrestling situation plays out. I'm interested to see how an Olympic gold medalist, how his conditioning fares up against and matches up against one of the best conditioned guys. Demetrius Johnson amazes me when he keeps a steady pace, and he even when he has a little bit of trouble, he keeps a steady pace. And by the fourth or fifth, he's speeding up when his opponents seem to be slowing down, or at least it feels that way. And that's really, really impressive. And yeah, there's an opportunity for history to be made here. Another title defense for Johnson as he's shooting for maybe that Anderson Silva record of title defenses. And for Cejudo, I think he would become the first person to win UFC gold and an Olympic gold as well. So I think that kind of interests me a lot athletically and historically.
Are you part of the countdown, Elias? Are you working for the UFC here? Because I think if you're not, they need to hire you. You know how they have those promo videos and they get all the journalists like John Morgan and Kevin Aioli, and they will have a little bit. I think we need to send that over, and they'll be like, promote this man, get him on here. Because you single-handedly, not that I wasn't excited for the fight, but I think you sold me and hopefully a lot of other people just then. For me, though...
Well, thanks, man. I'm not on the countdown. I pissed the UFC off too much to get invited to those things.
All right, just checking. Good. You're a rogue agent. We love that even more. Now, well, if we're talking about all the fights at the Unstoppable press conference, I mean, every single one of them gets me excited, even the rematches. But the one for me with the most intrigue, it's got to be Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson. I feel like some of these other fights, they're a little bit more predictable. I don't know what's going to happen with this one, because on one hand, you've got a guy that could have fought for the title a long time ago but didn't due to injuries. Then he almost retired, and now he's coming back. It's very rare that you have somebody who's 22-0, has dominated all of his fights, owns a victory over the current champion, and yet there's so many questions surrounding where he is both mentally and physically. We don't know how he'll look after a 2-year layoff. We don't know how much he's changed his style in training to accommodate his frequent injuries. And we don't know if he's still the man who can beat RDA or dominate Tony Ferguson in his usual fashion, as most people are expecting. Then you got Tony Ferguson, who's had a steady climb up the 155 ranks, hasn't really gotten the notoriety that maybe he deserved, but now it's sort of his big chance. Not only has he beaten everybody that's been put in front of him, at least for the last few years, but his fights are extremely exciting, something that Khabib has been criticized for. And so I think this is the perfect fight. If anyone's going to give Khabib a fun, exciting fight, I think it's Tony. If Tony can beat Khabib, it shows that he's ready to take that final jump from talent to contender and fight for a title. And if Khabib can put on a dominant performance, it means he's back and he's ready for his long overdue title shot. So I'm very curious to see what happens. I love this fight.
Well, one of the fights that I'm looking forward to is this Thompson-McDonald fight. Now, I'm a little bit disappointed that McDonald's the guy that he's fighting, because obviously they both train together. I'm a little bit worried about what's going to happen because McDonald is such a good wrestler. But if Thompson is somehow able to beat McDonald, I'm really excited about the possibilities of him possibly fighting for a title, fighting Robbie Lawler. Can you guys imagine some of these fights? I mean, Thompson is such an exciting striker, and I feel like he's sort of fallen into the pile of sort of back of the line for a while because people didn't really see him perform as well as he could have, because he was still sort of getting around this whole grappling aspect of his game. And now I feel like it's at a point where he's ready to take on guys like McDonald and maybe even make it all the way to the top of the ladder and become a champion. And if he does, can you imagine some of these exciting fights? I mean, if Condit ever wants to return, if Nick Diaz wants to return, Thompson versus any of those guys, striking matches there would just be absolutely unbelievable. He's one of those guys that whenever I go to the gym and my boxing teacher or kickboxing teacher yells at me for throwing stupid kicks, I can show some footage of him knocking someone out and proving them wrong. So we need this guy to survive so these MMA teachers stop teaching the same stuff in the gym and go out of their box, and he's the guy to do it, especially now with McGregor losing to Nate Diaz. So I'm really excited for this fight, guys. But, like we mentioned, a number of fun fights coming up with Rockhold versus Weidman 2, Verdum versus Stipe, Overeem versus Arlovsky. You spoke about this one, Nurmagomedov versus Ferguson, Rothwell versus JDS coming up. It does feel like the UFC needs to build more major stars, especially with McGregor and Holm both losing steam and Anderson Silva losing to Michael Bisping. Elias, I have to go to you first. These fights are fun, but do they have the major stars to make the casual fans care? Do they need to build more major stars because so much steam has been lost?
Well, I think they always need to build more stars, but I think if the UFC handles what has happened well, and just simply highlights the very compelling characters and stories of the people that upset the champions or the big stars this past weekend, I think they'll do just fine. I know, we're talking about Holly Holm as if the UFC is banking on her big time, but she was a spoiler in November, right? And we've already seen her get some traction in the mainstream. I certainly think Miesha Tate is plenty marketable. And I think as long as there's folks watching, and there were folks watching in November because of Ronda Rousey, and then they saw her lose to Holly Holm, I don't think they're all going to turn away. I think they're kind of intrigued by who this person was and knocked out the person they'd been hearing so much about. And I think that'll happen with Miesha as well, with Holly. And I think Miesha being champion allows them to bring Ronda back into the title picture in an actual compelling and convincing way. Similarly, Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz both are guys that have been kind of cult heroes for a long time, had big followings, and pull big numbers. So I think, no doubt, Conor McGregor took a hit. I don't think the UFC has to take a huge hit. I think Conor's still a champion. I think if he takes the time he needs to recover and has a good next title fight, he'll do well. And I think if anything, this just diversifies the opportunities for them to have some bigger stars. I mean, Nate Diaz, this is the first time he headlined a pay-per-view. I think with his ability to promote a fight, I think they need to just push him out front a bit more. He's handling himself well. Everyone treats the Diaz brothers like they're going to spit on everyone they talk to. No, the guy was just on like weird little tabloid news shows. He's nice. When he's not fighting someone or talking about fighting someone, he's fine. He's good with the young, the old, the men, the women. Like he's perfectly fine, and I think he's very relatable. He's very colorful. So yes, they always need to be building more stars. Yes, of course, there is a little bit of a transition or adjustment they need to make when big stars lose. But I think it affords them some opportunities if they're not scared to promote people that they weren't originally thinking of as stars.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think the UFC, regardless, is sitting pretty. There's a lot of good matchups with those, potentially fallen stars who haven't really fallen, but some of the rematches are going to do huge numbers. But as far as building new ones, I think it's a lot easier said than done. Like, there's no real formula for what exactly makes a star. You got, Conor and Ronda Rousey, they were both stars because of their big, unapologetic personalities, as well as their dominance. They were also polarizing, and, people wanted to either see them, beat and dominate or get beat. On the other hand, Anderson Silva and GSP were two very opposite draws, and neither one was outspoken or had big personalities. George was rather PR savvy and media friendly, and that's a polite way of saying, a lot of people didn't find him that his personality all that engaging. Anderson Silva didn't speak English at all, and so people couldn't really connect with him on a personal level, but they were dominant in their own ways and still became stars. I think with George, it was part of, the fact that he had like pretty much the whole of Canada behind him, as well as being extremely good looking and marketable. And with Anderson, it was just what he did in the cage. So it's very hard to say what makes a star, and I think the UFC is definitely trying to create new stars. They tried with Sage and Page, but unfortunately they lost. That's one of the necessary ingredients to becoming a star. You have to keep winning. I think Ronda is most definitely still a star and will probably be becoming an even bigger one with all the movies she's doing, getting more mainstream appeal. We just don't know how long she'll continue to compete. Then you have fighters who do win and get tons of marketing, but just for whatever reason never take off as stars, such as Demetrius Johnson, despite being an amazing fighter. But it's not for a lack of trying on the UFC's part. Connor's still a star, Ronda's still a star, John Jones is back, hopefully for good this time. Joanna Champion, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she's on her way to becoming a star. Luke Rockhold, man babe with wide appeal who could be a star if he keeps winning. He could be like the new GSP with all the female fans flocking to watch him fight. Nate Diaz, like you mentioned, has come out of nowhere, and recently, he appeared on some very big mainstream media outlets. I think one was called Extra. Who saw that coming? I fully expect Nate Diaz to be on the Ellen show by the week's end. No doubt about it. Nick Diaz, he's coming back and he's a star. So I think we're just in this transitional period where we don't know who the next big thing will be, but I think the UFC is definitely trying to create those stars.
Well, Cass, you mentioned Nick Diaz, and his suspension is going to be over in around August 1st. Elias, I want to know, who do you think makes sense as a potential fighter for him on his return? Is a potential fight for him on his return? And if you're the UFC, who do you match him up with? Because this could be a big fight and a big pay-per-view.
Yeah, great question. If I were the UFC, I would match him with Robbie Lawler. I don't think that's fair to the rest of the welterweight division. I don't think the UFC cares so much about fairness and stuff like that anymore with these things. If I were them, I feel like that's a fight with history, a rematch with history. I think there'll be a really interesting contrast in personality styles and in different types of intensity that both would bring in the build-up. I think they could market the hell out of it. I think you could have, the clip of Robbie getting knocked out over and over, and I think that'll do something to him. So I think that's a good fight. Me personally, I'd love to see Nick Diaz fight Damian Maia. That's just me. I think it's a great fight. I think it's an opportunity for Nick to prove that he can actually compete at the top level, championship level at welterweight, because I think Damian Maia is a legitimate contender right now at this point. And it'd just be a fun grappling match, hopefully. I'm a jiu-jitsu nerd, and I love that. But that said, otherwise, I think you try to get him as big of a name as you can. Maybe you try to convince Carlos Condit to fight him again. Maybe you try to convince George St. Pierre to fight him again. I have no idea if he's interested in that fight. But I think you want to give him a big fight. Maybe you try to convince Michael Bisping to fight him. I think you want to give Nick Diaz something big, because you never know when the next time you're going to get him again, and you know that he's going to build that fight and hype it, and you know that the fight itself is going to probably be pretty great too with him in it.
Well, that's exactly right. You never know what Nick's plans are. You never know how long he's sticking around for, when he'll disappear again, what press conference he'll miss, or any infinite number of unforeseeable but kind of unsurprising, because they're the Diaz brothers, circumstances. So, yeah, you're right. The key is to make the big fights, the biggest ones, while you can. And the good thing is, with Diaz, you've got 2 divisions to choose from. So a few fun fights. I mean, Matt Brown, that'd be a fun fight in a war. Donald Cerrone would also be a fun one. But I guess the only issues there, neither of them are massive names. And, Nick is all about those big money fights these days. If they do happen, I hope they are 5-round main events, which you wouldn't really lead a pay-per-view with them, but you'd probably find him on like a Fox card, and I don't know. It kind of seems like Nick Diaz wants those pay-per-view ones. Hector Lombard is something that a lot of people have been asking for, but I think best case scenario, if Hector beats Magny and sits at number 9 on the rankings, I still don't see that as a big enough fight for Nick. He said repeatedly that he doesn't want to climb the rankings, and that's what that fight feels like. This Bisping, potential for trash talk is limitless, and the two have already exchanged some, light Twitter barbs. Vitor Belfort would be an exciting matchup and a big name. I think 5 rounds would be really interesting between those guys, but the only issue there is Vitor looks like he's being primed for a Rockhold rematch. And then I'll save the best one to last, and you already led with it, Elias. Robbie Lawler, whether he's champion or not. I don't think Nick would really go for it since he's already beaten if Robbie isn't the champion, but I know there's contenders like Wonderboy, Rory Mack, and Woodley and Conda, but would anybody really be mad if Nick Diaz got an immediate title shot? I mean, I don't think anyone would care. He's lost his last 3 fights, but we already know that rankings don't mean anything. He's already fought for the title coming off a loss, so what's the big deal? And the UFC can really turn it up marketing. And even though he's coming off a loss, they could say he's coming off a close, controversial loss to one of the greatest of all time. And look how hard he pushed him and things like that. Nick gets the big fight that he's always wanted. Fans get to see an exciting scrap. Sounds like winners all around.
Yeah, so many great fights. And the only one I would add is, and I don't know if this would ever happen, but somehow McGregor gets back in that prime position and wants to have another crack at one of the Diaz brothers. Nick just so happens to be there. And you've got part 2, Conor McGregor chasing up Nick Diaz, saying that he wasn't ready for Nate, but he dominated him at the start and he just got tired and he beat himself. And he wants to beat up Nick and prove that he can beat up a Diaz brother, something like that. But nevertheless, a lot of great fights. And speaking of McGregor, Dana White recently said in an interview with ESPN, with a show from ESPN, that McGregor wants to return to fighting as soon as possible. And I mean, who are we kidding, guys? All signs are pointing to a fight at UFC 200, probably against Frankie Edgar. But I want to find out from you, Elias, is it too soon for McGregor to return? After back-to-back fights in a season of The Ultimate Fighter, could a break be what the featherweight champion needs?
Could definitely be what his brain needs. I mean, he's gone through a lot. He's taken some damage in that last fight. He was more than tired, I think, against Diaz, like a lot of McGregor fans are saying. If he was tired, he got really exhausted at the moment Nate Diaz started touching his chin. So I think, even though he didn't go out, he was definitely wobbled. And, I'm sure he wants to fight again. I mean, he's a great competitor. With that said, I kind of assume everything Dana White says is pretty much false. I mean, he was telling us, hey, Ronda is so motivated. She wants to fight again right away, like days after she was devastated by Holly Holm. Turns out the young lady was suicidal. Like, there's no real reason to trust that Dana White and the UFC will look out for the fighter's health. They're going to look out for themselves and their profitability. So does Conor want to fight again? I wouldn't be surprised. He's competitive. Should he rest? Yeah. How long should he? I don't know. But it's definitely too soon to be matchmaking for the guy when he's probably had a little bit of concussive damage in that fight. And as you said, he's had one of, if not the most hectic schedules in the UFC, not just with back-to-back training camps, not just with probably fighting through injuries like fighters always do, with all the additional pressures to the media and those commitments, the like of which that probably only he and Ronda Rousey understand. So, yeah, it would probably be good for him to have a break. The bad part about taking a break when you're in the fight game is you're also taking a break from getting a paycheck. These guys don't have pensions or regular salaries, so that's kind of tough. They always sell these things like, hey, he's got 6 months to rest. he doesn't have 6 months of rest if he's fighting in 6 months. He's got, he's got 4 weeks before he starts getting back in shape, getting in training, and then he's got to get himself a good 3-month training camp. So yeah, I think it's too soon, at least to be talking about a fight again with him. I think these fighters need the space and the time to think about what's best for them without all the pressure from the promoters, which, I'm sure that's not going to happen, but I think that's what they need.
Wow. You've done a great job, Elias, of convincing me otherwise compared to what I was originally going to say. I was going to say the 4 months, he's got 4 months to get ready for Frankie. He can, in theory, take a month break and then have 12 weeks to do a camp and, make the weight and make sure his cardio is fine. It's not like he got viciously knocked out. It wasn't like Dan Henderson, Michael Bisping, but you're right. He did get tagged. But then, even the fact that he got choked out, it was like, of course he took damage in the fight, but I don't know, the way you talk about it, and obviously your experience, your first-hand experience of getting in the cage and fighting, you would know a lot better. And I think in a lot of ways you're right. He talked about Jose Aldo needing a break after he got knocked out. Yeah. Granted, different story, knocked out. Sure. I think getting tagged is a little bit different. But nevertheless, I guess you can never be too careful. All that stuff aside, all the things that your physician and doctor would probably say to you and say, you need a rest, you need to take a break. I just don't see him taking a break. I don't see it. Yeah. I think I never try to read too much into it because people try and predict Conor McGregor's fight results by saying he's so motivated by money, he'll do this, he'll do that. And it's like, well, it doesn't really mean anything. But in this case, I do see him getting in there for such a landmark event, UFC 200. I don't see him missing out on that payday. I don't know. I think it would also go against a lot of what he's said recently about being the next Mayweather and the numbers and showing up and this and that. He did get asked at the press conference, and he said, maybe I do need a rest. I don't know. I guess we'll see, but I have a very strong feeling that he'll be at UFC 200. Now, I'll steal your favorite line. The UFC, I definitely see them sharpening the pencil, Dennis, to get him on UFC 200, greasing up the wheels, because they need him. They need him badly.
UFC 200 is almost like when you're in high school or high school, and you got the prom coming up, and you need a date for the prom, and the prom is UFC 200. Yeah. And the date to have is Conor McGregor, and Dana White needs that date for UFC 200. Otherwise, all the other schoolboys are going to make fun of him. I mean, it's one of those things where I think if UFC 200 wasn't around the corner, like you mentioned, Casper, I think Conor McGregor and his camp would be like, no doubt about it, we're going to take a break. How long for? I don't know, but I feel like they would have taken a break. He's made quite a bit of money. He needs a little bit of time. He's been looking tired for a really, really long time now. But because of UFC 200, it just seems like McGregor will return. And I think you guys made a great point, the big payday. I feel like in a lot of ways, McGregor feels like he's built up this situation to capitalize of UFC 200. He's sort of worked really hard to get himself in a position to be in the main event of the UFC 200 because we all know he's making those pay-per-view points off the buys. And UFC 200, even though right now the fights aren't really locked into place and we're not sure what's going to be happening on the card, I'm going to ask you guys about that just in a second. It is looking like it may break the pay-per-view record because obviously it's going to be such a landmark event. Well, that means he'll make even more money. I almost feel it was like this is what he's been working for from the beginning. So it's just, I think he's in that position where he's going to grit his teeth and no matter what, make sure he's on that card. But I mean,
and sorry, just to cut in there before we sort of move on, McGregor always has talked about getting in there, making the money, and then getting out. So you never know how long someone will stay in there. Maybe we'll see him competing for the next 10 years, or maybe we won't. But if his plan is to get in there, make as much money as possible, this is the best way to pad that nest egg. Get in, like you mentioned, Dennis, get those pay-per-view points for what could be the biggest card in history. And if that is your plan, to make as much money as possible, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to come in for UFC 200. But no doubt he has earned the break, that's for sure.
And especially when he's sort of, I want to just quickly ask you this, Elias, because it's one of the things that's been going through our mind before we jump onto the last topic, especially with the fact that he knows he's fighting a Frankie Edgar, and there's a good chance there may be 2 losses in a row for Conor McGregor. Do you think in a lot of ways losing at UFC 200 is a lot more profitable for Conor McGregor than if he does take that fight sort of down the track and makes a lot less money from it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue against that. I think that's even though he'll make any fight a big one at this point, I think that would seem to be the biggest fight he can have, and then the most profitable. And you're right. If he's trying to get in, get some money, and get out, win, lose, or draw, fighting in UFC 200 is probably the next thing that he would be thinking about. So yeah, I think you're right. I think even a loss there would profit him greatly. Just like I'm sure this last loss, he probably made more money than he's ever made before. Even though he lost this last one. So yeah, I think you guys raised really, really good points. It's tough. It's tough to not fight when you're a warrior. It's tough to not fight when you're making that much money and when you work so hard to create those opportunities for yourself. And it's tough to not fight when you're coming off a loss and you want to get that taste out of your mouth. So yeah, I mean, I would bet that he's gonna be pushed hard to fight at UFC 200, and I would bet he probably won't need to be pushed that hard to do it if he doesn't have any other injuries.
Yeah, I mean, it's the point that we've made clearly. It looks like UFC 200 needs this Conor McGregor fight. But recently, Tim Kennedy released a mock poster via Instagram. And on this poster, he had a bunch of the fights from UFC 200. Of course, nothing confirmed. But on it was McGregor versus Edgar, GSP versus Nate Diaz, Tim Kennedy himself versus Anderson Silva, and Jose Aldo versus Max Holloway. To the casual eye and the fans, it looked like a great card. But I want to ask you first, Elias, what do you think UFC 200 needs to make it a history-breaking card apart from this McGregor versus Edgar fight? What other fights would you like to see on the main card?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like the only things that would make a difference in pay-per-view buys, and it's not if that isn't exact like prognosticating science, I'm certainly not a scientist of it, but just in my own head, the only things that really make a difference were title fights and big stars. So I don't think that like fight number 4 or 5, even though it would get us excited, is going to make a big dent in terms of the pay-per-view numbers. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe internationally it would if you get like Anderson Silva on the card and things of that nature. But I think like the obvious things are they're going to try to convince Ronda Rousey to fight then, even though it seems pretty clear she doesn't want to. I think they're going to try to have Conor McGregor on the card. And I think if Conor McGregor has the right matchup there and the right build-up, and if Ronda Rousey's on the card, I think that's enough. If neither one of them is on there, then I think it's kind of difficult to make it for it to compete for, to be a record-breaking card in terms of pay-per-views sold. Even if you got an Anderson Silva on there, even if you got Nick Diaz coming back, unless Nick Diaz is fighting like George St. Pierre, it's going to be tough. Unless George St. Pierre comes back on that card, I think it's going to be tough. I think even if you like rush the heavyweight title, that in and of itself, even though it should matter, is not going to drive those numbers. So I feel like they definitely want Conor McGregor in on there. And I feel if Conor McGregor has the right opponent and the right build-up, that alone is going to put it into contention for one of the top selling cards of all time. If they get Ronda on there somehow, it would as well. Otherwise, yeah, they're going to try. They should try to get another Diaz brother on there against the right opponent. So some combination of Conor, Ronda, and just the right matchup will give it a chance in and of itself. Otherwise, I don't really see many other things making a big difference unless George St. Pierre wants to come back.
It's very, very solid points. And I think the only issue with Nick Diaz is correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis, I think his suspension comes up August 1st.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
That one.
You're right.
I mean, if he was around, you'd almost feel like the UFC would be so much happier about how everything's going.
Oh, it'd make things easier, especially even convincing Nick Diaz. He wants big fights, and you say, hey, you can fight at UFC 200. It'd be about the opponent, but I'm sure that'd be a big selling point. I mean, given the timelines and what would be available, I'd be pretty satisfied with Tim Kennedy's mock-up card. Don't forget that a lot of the, I don't know if I'd say big stars, but a lot of the big fights are already taken up in the lead-up. Like, you couldn't even push John Jones, who's the next, big name fighting. I think if he fought after 197, wanted to fight on 200, he'd have like 2 months or 2.5 or 1.5 months to get ready, and I don't think that's enough time. Conor, we've already established that he needs to be on the card. Lesnar was the UFC's biggest star at the time of 100. Conor's arguably the UFC's biggest current star between him and Ronda. If you're not going to have Ronda, you definitely have to have Conor. GSP's return, I think, would definitely give the card a massive X factor and a special feel where it's like, it's not just another card. It's something crazy's happening. GSP's returning, the prodigal son. And he could either fight Robbie Lawler or Nate Diaz. I'm happy either way, but I'd rather see him fight Lawler. I think that GSP beats Nate Diaz if he comes back, so seems a little bit predictable to me. And again, it's funny saying that considering what Nate just did to Conor when everyone predicted him getting beaten. But having said that, if Nate does beat GSP, he'd have beaten two of the company's biggest stars and would set himself up as a very, very big star for the future. Hopefully he'd stick around. So the other thing is, I actually really like this Tim Kennedy versus Anderson Silva fight because there's a huge beef there, at least on Tim Kennedy's part. I don't know how the UFC would feel about giving Tim Kennedy such a big fight after he spent a considerable amount of time giving his honest opinion on Reebok, and also the fact that in the lead-up, with all the mass media attention, he's going to be constantly bringing up Anderson Silva's failed drug test, which I don't think the UFC would love. But it's one of the best fights you can make at middleweight, not to mention, if that fight does happen, you've got Conor McGregor, GSP, and Anderson Silva, three of the company's biggest draws in history on one card. And I think that's pretty special. And then Aldo versus Max Holloway, the former featherweight king, and Aldo taking on the rising contender Max Holloway. I like it because whoever wins gets the next shot against either Conor or Edgar. So it kind of syncs up well with the main event. Jose Aldo opening up a card feels like insanity, but considering that historically he wasn't a draw in main events, I don't think it's that crazy, and I'd pay a lot of money to see that card.
Yeah, certainly. And you almost feel like now with Nate Diaz appearing on Extra, the UFC are going to ride that wave of momentum and try and get him in there into a fight. Now, with that GSP fight, I think, like you mentioned, Casper, we all think it's pretty clear that GSP would probably beat him. But then, does that make it a fight that GSP would want to take? Because then you make a lot of money. You're not really putting yourself at too much risk. It could be a fight that he'd be willing to return for. So that would be good. Or even if, Nate Diaz versus Robbie Lawler. I mean, look, Elias, you mentioned this before. A lot of unfair things happen in the UFC. But if Nate Diaz does fight Robbie and loses to Robbie, then they can sort of use that as a backstory for Nick fighting Robbie and sort of avenging his brother and beating him again. I almost feel like Nate Diaz should be on this card. They need to capitalize on Nate Diaz's popularity while they can. And I really wish Ronda Rousey would be on this card, but I just don't see her being on it. Even with Miesha Tate being the champion and Ronda sort of seeing a much easier fight for her than Holly Holm. I don't know. Just everything that she's been through, just some of the interviews that she's had, not wanting to talk about fighting at all and having all this stuff going on with movies. I'd almost want to see her come back in November, not July. I almost feel like we won't see a proper Ronda Rousey and everything going on in her camp and all the changes that she needs to make. Would you guys want to see a Miesha Tate versus Holly Holm too? I mean, Holly Holm's been wanting an immediate rematch. I mean, Elias, would you be interested in an immediate rematch with Holly Holm fighting Miesha Tate?
I definitely watch it. I feel like it would be a little unfair to the new champion, though, because it's not like it was that's just a personal preference. When an underdog somehow wins, despite maybe being down on their scorecards, but they somehow manage to scrap and win decisively without controversy. Man, I don't need to say, hey, run that back, do it again. Like, oh, geez, like it was hard enough to do it once. Let's give her a chance to avenge it against Kat Zingano. Let's give her Amanda Nunes, who I think has earned a title shot. Let's try to build this star, so to speak. And so, would I watch it? Yeah, great fight. You know, why not? Other than, like, I think it's a little bit unfair to give her Ronda or Holly Holm next. I think we should try to give Miesha her own space as champion instead of just say, run it back, let's try to get another champion. Let's try to get the old champion in there. Like, no, I think Miesha's very marketable. Let's give her some people that have arguably earned a right to fight her next, like Amanda Nunes, or that she has a pretty good chance of beating, but has something personal there to avenge, like with her loss to Kat Zingano. So I'd like to see Miesha defend next against some of these other people, basically Amanda or Kat, personally.
I'd like to see the rematch, just not an immediate rematch. I'd like to see it somewhere later down that road. It's still an intriguing fight. I mean, Holly did dominate throughout majority, about 70-80%, and then got finished at the end. So yeah, there is a lot of intrigue in there. I don't know if it's fitting for UFC 200. First of all, it's a rematch. Second of all, I think Miesha definitely brings in a different market that maybe Conor McGregor wouldn't, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd really like to see it on UFC 200. And I'm with you, Elias. I'd rather see... I think one of two things are going to happen. Either Miesha Tate will take a fight because she doesn't want to wait till November, or I think the UFC might be like, no, we don't want to risk somebody like Amanda Nunes, say, beating Miesha Tate, or Kat Zingano beating Miesha Tate, and then now you don't have the Ronda rematch between Miesha or between Holly. So they may make her sit out. But chances are she'll take a fight, and if she's going to take it against anyone else, then I don't think that's really UFC 200 worthy. I think we need somebody else in there.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. The thing is, it's a great point made, Casper. I don't think the UFC will let her take another fight. I think they'll give her such a good offer for a fight with Ronda Rousey. It'll motivate her to stay out and not fight until she comes back. Because they let's be honest, this is a great fight for the UFC to bounce back. Miesha Tate versus Ronda Rousey. If Tate somehow does beat Rousey, then she becomes even more popular. You can have her as an even more popular champion. But if Rousey beats Tate, which is a good chance, maybe Rousey will hang around for a bit longer. So some interesting stuff there. And then maybe Holly Holm can work her way back up to another title shot, and that can be that big rematch that the UFC were hoping for. But nevertheless, Elias, thank you so much for coming onto this breakdown. Guys, you can catch Elias on Twitter at Elias Cepeda. He does great stuff. And check out his great work on Fox Sports. As always, it's been a real pleasure having you on the program, man.
Always glad to be on with you, Casper and Dennis. Thanks so much, guys.
Awesome. The pleasure is always ours. There he is, guys. Elias Cepeda of Fox Sports. Always a huge pleasure to have him on, and always providing great insight. He'll definitely be on the show again soon. And with that, pretty much brings us to the end of the show, doesn't it, Dennis?
Yeah, that's right. Another great show. Thanks so much to our guest coach, Winklejohn, of course, Gunnar Nelson, and Chael Sonnen, the American gangster, Elias Cepeda. Obviously a great guest to have on to break down all the topics in the world of MMA. And next week, for all of our listeners, we won't be coming back with the traditional submission radio. And Cass, you want to tell the people why?
Well, UFC Brisbane, of course. Every time we do go to an event, whether it's UFC 193 or Fight Night 55 or any of those, just makes it hard to obviously do the show at the same time and lock in guests and all that kind of stuff that goes with it, because we're there for fight week. So we'll be covering UFC Brisbane. Not to worry, because there's going to be a lot more content than usual. We're going to have everything from, all the pre-fight and post-fight coverage, the weigh-ins, the stare-downs, any press conferences before, after, interviews. We're also going to be doing some fun stuff with the EA UFC game. There's going to be an event there in Brisbane, so we're going to be getting a chance to, I believe, play some games with the fighters and things like that. So just content galore. Let us know if there's anything specific that you guys want to see, but there's pretty much no better time to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already.
That's right. And with that, guys, we'll see you back in a couple of weeks with another episode of Submission Radio and on YouTube for our coverage of UFC Brisbane. Have a great week.